In this video, we're going to look at a pair of Marlin 22 lever action rifles. This one here on the top is the 39A. Kind of an American classic, very popular gun. I believe this particular gun was made in the 70s. So it shows, you know, the wood, blued finish, and that is typical of the workmanship and the quality of that time period, even in a gun like this, like 22. You know, it's a well-made piece, you know, butt plate with a little white trim. Very nice gun, okay? And then below it, we have the 39B, which, again, I think this one was made in 71. You know, hardwood with a nice gloss finish to it. They both have the little scope mount things on the top, iron sights. And the main difference between the A and the B is the A has a little bit, well, the barrel looks about, no, it's a little bit heavier, larger in diameter barrel and longer, where this one's more, has a lighter barrel, shorter barrel, but basically the same gun. Marlin made these guns for many years. I don't quite know the history on them, other than I think there was a model 39, then it became the 39A, and then this D variant I haven't heard of. I've heard of the M, the Mountie, and there were commemoratives, and if you go through the Blue Book of Gun Values, you see all the different variations with this rifle. I'm not going to go into the rifle itself. You know, it's a pretty neat gun. It is a breakdown gun. You can take this apart here by loosening this nut, and then the lower half of the receiver swings away into two pieces with this particular model rifle. Very solid weapon. I mean, nice. And what has happened, much like the Nylon 66, this gun has kind of become a classic, an American classic, and what I call like a fad gun. All right, and we'll look at the D from the other side. As you can see, it's all well machined, all kinds of little tiny screws that go in to this thing. And like I said, both of these break down. You can take them apart, and that's basically how you get the bolt out to clean the internal mechanisms and stuff. But like I was saying, I believe what it is as our society and stuff changes and things are different. When people get older, they look for quality and what they remember when they were younger, back in the 60s and 70s. You know, a gun made with nice hardwood, nice blued finish, you know, nicely machined, not painted black dull with synthetic stocks. So I believe this gun is out of production per se, other than the custom shop. And now while we kind of took a look at it, I want to bring up some things like why these guns are popular, and when you're purchasing used guns and guns that are no longer in full-scale production. I did look it up, and we'll discuss it. These are available at the custom shop. And these are not my guns, and I'll tell you the story behind it and how I ended up getting these, and I'm working on them for someone, and some of the problems that arose, and it's quite an interesting story. Okay, so this is how the story goes. Generally, for a lot of my friends and that, I clean rifles for them, or if they got something where a part is missing or a sight is missing, I'll go look it up and replace some small little things for them. But generally, a lot of times when somebody inherits a gun or something, they'll ask me to clean it and check it out for them, and they either keep it or they want to sell it. So a friend of mine approached me a little while ago and said, "Hey, you're into guns. Can you find me a Marlin 39A? I'd like to get one." Now he's an older man, and he suffers from some medical issues and that, and he just said he had one once and he would like to get another one. I don't know whether he had to sell it or something, but he's retired and he said he'd like to get a nice Marlin 22 to shoot again, something to do with his grandkids or something. All right, so I said okay, and not being into rimfires very much, I've seen them, I've had them, used them, bought and sold them. I had an old Remington Model 12 at one time, had it for a while, shot it, and then somebody wanted it more to me and I sold it. But I never really got into rimfires an awful lot. I have one or two bolt actions I keep around. And I wasn't quite familiar what he's asking me, because my thing is the old military surplus. But then, once I went and looked it up and figured out what it was, I remember this, Marlin lever action 22s. And they're a nice gun, they're a well-made gun, but I did work on one many years ago before I did YouTube videos. And a guy had this model rifle, one of these here, I can't remember what it was, but it was a Marlin. And somebody horsed it up and did things to it, and they put parts inside backwards, and it took me forever because I wasn't familiar with the gun. And all he gave me was some printed exploded view. But after fooling around for hours and 2 or 3 different attempts, I got the gun straightened out. Basically, I had to clean out stuff, put the stuff that was put in backwards back in right, and replace a part inside. Which, with this particular gun, that's mostly what you're going to deal with. They get a lot of use. There's different things inside that'll wear. And there is one sticking point with the cartridge guide. And I'll go over that later, and that's what happened here. But also, another thing about these is when something's popular, something's sought after. It's kind of like the nylon 66s. I cleaned one, I did the videos on, I cleaned it for a guy that inherited the gun from his father. And the other one I did, an individual bought the gun, tried taking it apart to clean it, and couldn't figure out what he was doing and left the gun in parts in a box for 20 years till I told him I'd put it together. And he did it in a way to where I had to strip that gun down almost to the bare frame, then go through the instructions and reinstall everything back together again. And it took 3 hours. And all I did was disassemble it correctly and get all the parts out of it, then reassemble it and get it back together. So they're nice guns. Back 40 years ago was a commonplace thing. If you wanted one, you went to the store and bought one, Same with a nylon 66. But then they stopped making them. I believe this is not in full production. You can get one of these guns from the custom shop, because I went to check to make sure I knew what I was talking about today. When I went to the Marlin site, you could go to the custom shop. They have 39A Super Deluxe with a retail value of $3,695. All right, so when a guy asked me to find this gun and look around for one, of course I go on to Gun Broker, and all these guns are $500, $600, $700 some dollars, and I'm like, to me that didn't seem right. It's like a nylon 66. I don't think you can touch one for less than $500. Okay, people get set in their head. So I look up the gun, in the value book, blue book of gun values, which is probably the best guide to go by. They list the 39A made in the 70s, and then they have the JM. One of these has a JM barrel and all this other stuff and that, but hardwood like this, old 1970s, 60s, 70s finish on it, blue, okay, which would be this one here, in 100% condition, which is mint condition, really never been fired. They have a value of 700 or maybe a little over 700. The D with the value in it at 100%, even though I don't think this is that common of a gun, again, $600 and some dollars. Okay, so how I ended up getting my hands on these two or working on them for my friend, I went to an estate auction and they listed a 39A. Even though there really wasn't much in the auction, or not auction, it was a sale. It was an estate tag sale. And what that is different than an auction is you go in to where the household was and everything was up for sale. The furniture, tools in the garage, everything, okay, glassware, dishes, and the guy was a gun collector and they had a large amount of guns in an outbuilding that were all priced, and you went in there and if you wanted to purchase them, you could purchase them just straight out for what the price was on there. It was not an auction. In other words, you walked in, there was a rack of 50 guns or on a shelf, and if you wanted one, there was a price tag on it, and if you wanted it, you just said, okay, I'll take it for the price on the tag. So of course they had one of these in there, so I said, all right, let me go see if I can find it for this old guy. And I was figuring, I asked him before I went there, I said, what are you willing to spend for a used gun? And he told me $650. And I said, ooh, okay, I doubt very much that they'd have a used gun in there that's maxed out at 700 for I could probably get it and stay within his price parameters. I went in there, they had a gun, had a sling, it was a 39A, and it was carried. The guy hunted with it, you could tell. The sling was worn, the wood, everything. The bluing was not like this. The bluing on these guns is actually particularly nice. Okay, it's not faded or worn. The bluing was worn. The gun was worn. It was not in, I'd say it was in 75% condition. The price tag was $950, so I passed. So about a week later I was discussing this sale with a friend of mine, and he's a collector, say, he's not a dealer. Oops. Alright, sorry for the interruption. So, like I said, I was discussing it with my friend, and he collects guns, and more, not so much the military, that's not his thing. But he actively buys and sells guns, and he likes the older Western style gun, lever action rifles, and some other stuff. So he mentioned to me, well, I have two. I have 39A, and he goes, I have a carbine. And he goes, I may be willing to part with the carbine. I said, okay, I'll stop by the house, see what you got. And I said, give it to me, and I'll see if this guy would be interested in it. I'll show it to him, let him look at it. And I told him what he said he was willing to pay. So I go to the house, and we look at the two guns. So I said, okay, here's the carbine. And I said, this is the one you want to sell? And he's like, oh, well, I don't know, I said, all right. Which one do you want to sell or whatever? So he can't make his mind up. Then he says, well, take the both of them. I'll tell you what I want for them. See if the guy wants them. I said, okay, we'll do that. And I said, there's no money changing hands. So if the guy don't like the guns, like the price, then we just bring them back in there, and that's the end of that. He goes, okay. So I get the guns, and I'm trying to get a hold of this other gentleman, and I couldn't. So So I take my friend's 2 rifles, and he told me this one he bought at an auction, and this one he bought from an individual a very, very long time ago. He just bought it. And that. So I go to take them apart, okay, and you can find the videos where you take them apart. This one here, I could tell nobody took it apart, because once the screw was backed out, I had to tap it pretty good to get it to come undone. And it was caked in filth. They shot it, never took it apart, never cleaned it. The whole inside of the action had that black, grimy residue from 22 long rifle. And I mean, it was bad. I had to scrub and soak. It took me over an hour to clean the inside of this gun out. So I said, okay, cleaned it out. And if you see where you can lock the ejector back, I couldn't do it on this one, so it was a pain. So I went and took a bore snake just to knock the bore out. And with a modern 22, usually, even if people shoot them and don't clean them, there's just a little bit of a film or residue in there, and a couple quick passes with a bronze brush and a patch, you should be good to go. So I'm cleaning this one. There's some kind of resistance with the bore snake. And I'm like, what the hell? So I got it apart. I looked down the bore, and I thought it was a ring at first. And then after getting the bore scope down there, what happened is this. With the bore scope, I went down, and at about 2 inches in, about here, and for 2 to 3 inches, this whole section here is corroded and rusted, the bore. I mean, it's rusted to where the bore snake had a hard time, but when I tried running the bronze brush down, it destroyed the brush. The guy actually got stuck, and I had to get another rod and drive it out. I've never seen a bore corroded on a modern 22 as bad as this. I have no idea what they did to this gun, and it's a shame because it's actually unfireable. And when I did take this apart, I noticed, I don't know if this was somebody tried to fire it and it got bent, but I don't know, it's not good. And when I talked to my friend about it, he bought the gun at an auction, and he didn't get it cheap either. I asked him, I said, did you ever look down the bore? Or did you just buy this gun and put it in a safe? He said, I bought the gun, wiped it down with oil, cleaned the outside off. Never looked down the bore, never disassembled it, never, cleaned the bore out. Just put it in a safe for a while. Well, I was sorry to tell him. I said, this gun, can't sell it. It's inoperable, So, it's kind of sad, okay? And the moral to the story is, the same thing is, they see something they believe is valuable, okay? They buy it, and I've seen people at gun shows pick a gun up, never look down the bore, just buy it flat out and walk off with it. My friend it was a mistake to do that. He should at least shine the light down the bore. Sometimes at an auction you cannot do that, okay? Granted, but he should have done it when he got home, at least. And another thing with these guns, while I got this one down, if you notice, these have a factory scope mount that gets bolted on the top here for the little 22 groove. Well, I took this one off. This gun was intact and probably would function, but if you look up inside there, there's a little sheet metal plate, and when you see that lift arm come up, without that little piece of spring steel up in there, the bullet just jams up into this empty space in here. So there's a cartridge guide plate, and there is a screw, okay? These are the 2 holes for the screws to hold that sight base, and this one here is where this other screw goes down and goes into that piece of sheet metal that locks into the up inside the receiver. Now the other gun I worked on, they had some piece of, looked like hacksaw blade or something shoved in there and another screw driven up, and all I did was bend it back down and the gun functioned and I returned it to the owner. This one had it in there, okay, which I had to remove because I called my friend and said, hey look, the one gun is no good. So then I took this one here, the actual 29A, I took this gun apart. It came apart easier. It was clean inside, did not look terrible. But then I'm looking and you couldn't see underneath this. The little sheet metal guide and screw was missing. And when I pulled it off, you could see the hole down in there. So now this gun, if you put a cartridge in, when the lifter would come up, the cartridge wouldn't hit that spring guide and this gun would jam. The gun didn't function. Even though it is not in horrible shape, also they did something, I'm not quite sure what these two small screw holes are here, but one is pushed inside and the other one is missing. And also I told him, did you notice that here that the tube was damaged? If you can see, it's bent. The end of this tube got bent somehow on there, the magazine tube. You can see it up in there. And again, he tells me no. You know, I bought the gun and wiped it down. Didn't notice the damage up there. Didn't know there were parts missing. Alright, so you ask, what's the moral of the story? Well, again, like I said, it's in a field I'm not interested in, the 22s, but it's something that's quite popular and people are willing to pay money for these older guns, these classic guns. You can even say Americana, that have been around for a while. I mean, the nylon 66 was something unusual when it came out in the 60s. It was the self-lubricating gun. You never really had to clean or something, but it was awful difficult to take apart. Okay, it was popular. I've seen them. I've fired them. I remember them back when I was a teenager. And after seeing the other people have me work on them, I wouldn't mind getting one and making a video of my own on it. But then when I seen what the price was for them, to me, it's, and again, it's what's worth it to you. Like the one individual said that he would pay $650 for a decent gun with a pistol grip and the wood stock. That's what we had there. But my friend, that's the collector, what he's doing is he's just accumulating guns. Just he sees it, it looks all right on the outside, doesn't check the bore, doesn't check anything, and just gets it. He's got a price in his head what it's worth, and if he could buy it for less and make a profit, then he goes for it. Okay. But he doesn't shoot the guns. He doesn't, other than wiping the outside down and dusting it off, he doesn't disassemble the weapon and clean the weapon. And he puts them in storage. And he burned himself on this one. He never checked it. And that damage, someone must have got water in the barrel and let it sit for years on its side somewhere. Okay? Because there's no rust anywhere else inside the gun. So it's very, very curious to me. This one somebody's used and just beat around and just decided to sell it. A little damage on the tube, but they must have had trouble with the feeding, and they took that screw and a little plate out. But here's the thing about these guns. Check for it. Because you can get the plate from Gun Parts Corporation, the shell guide. You can get a brand new one for $15. you can't get the screw. It's no longer in production everywhere. I've looked online, it's out of stock. You can't get that little screw to go in there and hold the plate in. So after talking to my friend, I said, well, maybe I'll go eventually run into this guy. I had to take the part out of this gun, the screw in the plate, and put it in this rifle, and now the rifle's working. But like I told him, with the damage to the magazine and the wear and some of the other stuff on there, it's not 100% when someone takes a close look at it. If you're asking somebody to drop $750 for a 22, anything whatsoever on there that's not right is going to come into question. Myself, other than just doing a favor for two friends, bringing them together for a transaction, that's about it. It's just, some of my time in that. My friend, I'm doing it for, me and him trade favors all the time, one way or the other. He did something for me back a while when I needed some gun parts, and I help him out, when he needs some stuff done. So it's not a matter of money, but it does tie up time, and then you get into this. And then the embarrassment, I said, if we didn't check this and sold the gun, the guy went to shoot it. So, God forbid if something happened, because this barrel is unshootable. I've never seen that on a 22. It tore the bronze brush up. So the gun shot. So the moral of the story is, if you can, and I know a lot of circumstances like the Carcanos, okay, you can't look down the bore or check it and make sure. But if you're at a local auction or a local gun shop and you're buying these things, and you can get your hands on it before you purchase it, bring a bore light and at least look down the bore and check, like I said with this here. Had that shell guide missing, so that gun wouldn't function. I mean, it's not in bad shape. It's a nice older gun, but as is, buying it, it wouldn't function unless we put those parts back in. So, moral of the story is, pay attention to what you're doing. Try to check things out. Take your time if you can. I know nowadays you can't. You can't look at the guns. You can't check the bores. A lot of the time, the way you buy them, like on the gun broker, you have to take the people's word for it. That's why it's kind of important to make sure, if you get into an auction, the terms. Can you return the gun? A lot of gun broker major sellers will give you a 3-day non-firing inspection period. I myself, like with the old military guns, if there's rifling and stuff in there, whenever I sell them, it's as is, no refunds, no nothing. And a lot of people do that. Okay, and the reason is I don't want to screw around mailing a gun and someone looks at it, or they do go out and shoot it and, well, I don't like it, and then send it back. So that's another thing. Check out the terms when you buy. Okay, and I don't know how long ago this auction that he went to and bought this was, but I think it's been years. So there's no recourse or nothing he can do about that rifle. Alright, so that's my little spiel on it. But like I said, they are interesting, and yes, nowadays, I guess what it would cost to have one of these made with high-grade wood and a polished trigger and all this other stuff, $3,600 or something. You can go to the website and see it out of the custom shop. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it is, a nice heavy 22. It is a well-made weapon. A little bit different. The nylon 66, that's space age weird stuff, but it's a handy, good shooting gun. This here is more of a solid traditional weapon. Pretty heavy. It's probably accurate, accurate as hell. And I guess I could see why, if you really wanted one, why you'd go and spend that much money on them. But for me, I don't know. I guess if you went and bought a new CZ or something, it's close up there to $600 for a little bolt-action rifle. Well, anyway, I hope you enjoyed the discussion and the pondering and the story. So stay tuned and keep the support coming.